Hi there. I just want to refresh your memory on the basics of how to edit on Adobe Premiere so that you can do it right from the beginning and all year long. So let's get started. So remember this home screen here on the monitor where our little Astro guy is what we call the desktop. So we're going to start by right-clicking on the desktop and making a new folder. Always name your folder the period number that you're in. So if it's period 2 and your last name and hit OK. And so then this folder is created there, and this is where we're going to put all of our project files and our assets. So an asset is video, graphics, music, everything you use that you import into Adobe Premiere. And then to get started, so we're going to hit the folder button on the bottom. We're going to move all of our shots from our memory card. Remember, memory card shows up and it's usually USB drive or removable disk in the DCIM folder. And then you're going to drag all of these from the memory card to your folder here. And if you want to draw a box around it with your left mouse, you can and drag it. If you want to hold Control down on the keyboard, you can click the ones you want. And either way, you are going to drag them all into your folder on the desktop. And then when that's done, I can double click on my folder and I will see it there. Remember, this little button at the bottom will display your shot so you can see it. If you want to see it bigger, you can hit view at the top and extra large, or details if you're looking for, or sorry, list if you're content, if you're looking for date and time. So then that will help you out. But that's all under view at the top. Then we are going to unplug our memory card because then we won't get confused. And so you see when I unplug it, it goes away, and our shots are still on the desktop. That's important. So then we're going to double click Adobe Premiere. So you can click it at the bottom on the taskbar down here. You can also, should be on the desktop when you double click it. We are editing this year on Adobe Premiere 2024, which looks similar to last year, but it's a little different. This is what we call the launch pad. And on the launch pad, try to get used to not using the launch pad. So I know a lot of times we rely on the last few projects are here, and then I just open my own project. But the problem is if a lot of students are editing, your project will no longer be here, or if we're doing certification, you will lose your project because it only shows you the last 10 projects and that were worked on this computer. So it might not be there. So click New Project the first time you're editing. Very important that you name your project correctly up here at the top, and you put it in the correct folder. So under project name, we are going to name it your last name and whatever it is. So be very specific. So in this case, I'm making a commercial about spray paint. So don't just name it commercial, don't name it thing, don't name it project, because you will have a lot of edits by the end of the year. So be specific, last name, what it is, and more importantly, or very important, hit that project location. See, right now it's putting in some random weird file folder, and then when I go to edit, I can't find it the next day because I don't know where it's at. So we're going to click choose location. And then we're going to make sure it's on the desktop in our folder. And then when we click select, this project will go into our folder. You could tell you did it right when it says it up here at the top, that desktop, and then the folder you created on the desktop. Then you're going to hit create. And then it's going to show up like this. So a couple of things. First thing I want you to do when you start is always check your autosave settings. So that's under edit, click preferences, autosave. And over here, it will automatically save projects. We want that box to be checked. We want it to automatically save every 5 minutes. Don't do it for 2 minutes because it'll just constantly slow you down when you're editing. But 5 minutes is fair. Project versions, about 20 is good. That means it'll save for 20 versions before it starts deleting your autosave projects. Very important because the computers do crash. And if you crash and haven't saved in 50 minutes, without autosave, you lose everything and you'll have to start all over again. So every 5 minutes, then at least it's backing it up without you hitting save, but you should still always hit save if you can. So then click OK. Up here at the top is our workspaces. If you remember, depending on what you are editing, you want to use these workspaces to your advantage. Sometimes they are customized so that you have the ones that you want, and I could show you that in a different video. But for you guys, you'll hit that rectangle button with the blue button, rectangle box with the blue button, and it'll show you all the workspace. So depending on what you're doing, so right now we're editing, so that's on editing, but if I want to fix color, when I hit color, it just changes the interface to then show me what I can do to change the color. If I want to just fix the audio, I click that workspace under audio, and then it changes how it looks, so that way I can work on editing. So again, let's go back to editing. And if someone messes it up, so let's say someone last period moved this window and then my source window is super small, you can reset it by going up to Window, Workspaces, and reset to saved layout, or Alt-Shift-0 on the keyboard. So when you do that, it'll automatically just put it back the way we like it. That makes sense. So no matter what, if someone messes it up, you can go again, Window, Workspace, reset to save layout, and it'll just go back, or Alt-Shift-0. Then we're going to grab our shots from our desktop folder, and you could do it two ways. You can import or you can drag. I don't want to drag my project file, so I'm holding down Control and dragging it in. And so there's my shots. If I want to make a new sequence, I can just drag it right in, or if I want right click, you can also make a new sequence from the clip, and then it puts it in automatically. I'm just going to hit Control Z to undo. You can hit new item and then sequence, and then you can tell it what you want. So if in this case we were going to do a video for social media, I could pick this template, and then it will make sure that that is the correct resolution and frame rate that I need. Most of us, though, however, we just go right to editing. So in this case, let's start from scratch here. And you double click on it, find where you want it to start. So let's say I want it to be right about here. I on the keyboard marks an in, your beginning point, or this is your in, or again, the keyboard letter I. Find where you want it to end, and then hit O on the keyboard, or this button here will mark it out. And if I drag from here and bring it down to the timeline, then it will drag. And in this case, there was no audio on it, so that's why there is no audio on this track, even when I drag from the main window. So remember, this is your drag video only button here. This is your drag audio only button, and then when you drag it, it will just drag that down. If you drag it from the big window, it will drag both audio and video, assuming it has audio and video. Then down on the timeline, you can still trim it. So these red arrows here, you can still drag it to shorten it or lengthen it back up from either way, so the beginning or the end. Then I'm going to go to another shot I have. So this is an interview I have of her. And same thing, I'm going to mark an in, find the beginning, pretend that I... So right there, spacebar is how I can stop and play. I for in, find her out. Pretend that's it. O for out. And again, if I drag from the big window, oops. If I drag from the big window, it will drag her audio and her video. I'm going to undo for a second. If I just drag from this, it drags just video. And if you drag from here, it drags just audio. So depending on what you want, what happened earlier was this button wasn't turned on. So these here is, what do I want? I want video and audio. And where do I want it? I want it on track 1 and track 2. Track 1, video, and audio 1. So again, I'm going to drag it here. Remember, this is your zoom. So just zooms your view so you can see it better at the bottom. And again, I can trim or make it longer. Whatever I want to do on here, I can make it longer or shorter. Let me see if let me grab some graphics from another folder. So let's do this one. So I'm going to drag it to import it. So let's say in this case, I double click and it shows up here. If I wanted to put this graphic in between, so I'll mark an in and an out. And if I drag it down here, it will delete what I have. See, it's what we call overwrite. So I'm going to Control Z. If I drag it on this top track, it will just overlay it. And I can make it shorter or longer on there. Right. I'm going to undo again to show you. If I want to drag it in between these shots without deleting, then you're going to hold the control button down. This is called a ripple effect. And when I let go, it put it in between the shots and did not delete any of my clip over here. So those are different ways of doing it. This button here is also a ripple effect. So when you click on that, if I change the back of this to make it shorter, it ripples and brings the whole clip with it. See the difference? If I don't use the ripple effect, when I drag this out, now I have a gap. I have a black spot here. So, and then you can click and delete that if you want, but if you know you don't want any black or any gap, then just hit that ripple button, ripple edit, and then when you drag it, it will shorten it and move everything with you on there. Some other things on your timeline, this is your mute button. M is mute. So if you just want to mute it so you can't hear it right now as you're editing, then you would hit that M button for that, and that's the track. So right now we only have one audio on here, and I'm just muting track 1 on that. If you want to move things around, let me get back out of the ripple tool. I can move this around and move it to the back side, but again, there is that gap. So instead, if I use the ripple button and move this, oh, never mind. It's not going to work on that. What else do I want to show you? Let's show you fading. So let's say you want to fade your audio. So the old way we used to do it was to add a transition. On Adobe 24, there's a new thing. So you see there's a little square that's like half gray and half darker gray. Now when you click it, it'll allow you to add a fade. And right now it says duration 20 frames. Now it's 1 frame, 2 seconds. 2 seconds. So now you can automatically add a fade at the end of your audio by just clicking on that little rectangle button that allows you to move back and forth. What else do I want to show you? T for text. So again, I'm going to go back to my workspaces and I'm going to hit captions and graphics. It'll just change it. These are all templates you can use. So if you want one of these, you can drag it on top of the video. And so it will add, see how it says insert name. And then to change that, I'm just going to click on it. And then over here, it will tell me what I can change it to. So then in this case, I can just start typing example graphic. We call them supers. Let's make it a super. Superimposed on the screen, or a lower thirds is another term that it's used. And then if you want to change the font and the color, that's over here, again, because we are in the captions and graphics workspace, so it makes it really easy. I can change the color. That's the fill. I can add a stroke, check the box, and then change the color of the stroke. I can make the font size bigger. I can change the font itself, make sure it's highlighted, and then it'll change it. You can also change the space between letters, which is called tracking. So when down here, I lower this, and then now my letters are super close if I want. Kerning, if I want the space between lines, I only have 1 line. If I want to move this, I would go back to hitting that select tool, and then I can move it around. I think I can just resize it this way if I wanted to by just dragging the corners and then move it there. And down here on the timeline, I see that super or that chiron or lower thirds, and I can make it shorter or longer by using the trim button, or I can move it around to where I want. I can also do that nifty fade thing that we did earlier. So when I zoom a little bit in, if I wanted to, I can fade it in and out. And you can also right click and apply default transition. So then it will automatically fade your super in and out like that. And if you don't like it, Control Z, or I can hit the delete and get rid of it. We did text. Let's do music. So there's some sounds here. This one is, when I double click on it, it is the sound of spraying paint. So, and if I want to drag that audio down here, I can, so that when she's spraying it, or to make that sound effect when it sprays there. If I want to change the sound, I would hit the workspace and go to audio, and I can change my volume. This is on track 2. So over here under track mixer or clip mixer, when I want track 2, I click on it. And then over here are my bars to change the volume. So if I want to lower it, I can lower it a little bit there, or I could raise it either way. That would just affect the clip. The difference between a clip mixer and a track mixer, if I change audio 2, it changes everything on audio 2. So if I had instead this sound was down here, then it would lower all of the sound, including this and this. So usually that's only for music. If you want to adjust the whole track, and I'll Control Z, undo a little bit here. So usually we just use that clip mixer, which is hidden in that drop down arrow here. And you can then change your controls. If you want to change your effect controls, will also allow you to change, if in the case you don't like the tone of the voice, this is a little more advanced. If you want to make it deeper or higher pitched, then usually that would show up in your effect control. So over here, when I clicked on that clip, it will let me change some levels, some pans in order to affect it there. If I wanted to add some special effects or transitions, then I'm going to go to Workspace, click on Effects, and depending on what I want, I can pick one. So if I want to do a, let's say I want to do a transition. So let's go to Wipe, and then checker wipe. Then I just drop and drag between my shots, and then you will see that checkerboard wipe there. And if I don't like it, I can Control Z or hit delete on that to do that. So let's talk a little bit about the bin here. So let me go back to Workspace and change back to editing. Some buttons you should know, or icons you should know in this bin. These are video clips with audio, and it's nice when you hover, it tells you used it one time, so you know you've got it in the track. This is just audio. So again, when you hover it and see that little blue button there, tells you it's just audio. This is just a graphic, and it's telling me I haven't used it yet because it doesn't say I've used it. And then down here, very important, is the sequence button. So the sequence is this timeline, this whole project. So if I wanted to make a new sequence, so let's just pretend I'm going to make a new sequence, click OK. So now I have 2, and you see it on your timeline as tabs. So you can go back and forth. So if I was doing a movie and this is scene 1 and this is scene 2, I've got them as 2 separate tabs, and I can go back and forth. And here in my bin, I see the project button, and then it is also named. And if I want to rename it, I can right click on it and rename it. And then this is scene 2. And then you'll see it changes automatically over there as well. So I've got 2 sequences that are created. I see them in my bin. I've renamed them, and I can go back and forth if I want to, in the event that you do have 2 scenes. We did audio, we did captions and graphics, we did editing, color. Let's go back to my spray paint sequence. If I don't like the color of it, when I click it in my timeline, go to Workspace and go to Color. Then over here under Basic Corrections, I can change. Temperature is how much orange and blue it is. Tint is your color, purple and green. Saturation is how much color comes into it. So if I want to make it black and white, then I would do that, but it only does that clip. So there's a different way to do the whole project as a whole, and that's a different video. If it's dark, then I'm going to change the exposure to bring up the brightness. But when you bring up the brightness, you also want to bring up the contrast so that you don't totally wash out your shot. And then these are other things, highlights and shadows. So that is how you fix your color. There's also a white balance button. So if we know, let me just reset some of this. If we want it to white balance based on the picture, when you click the eyedropper, you tell it which part should be white. So let's pretend this canvas should be white. and then it'll adjust all the rest of the colors accordingly. So I do like that because sometimes the color is a little off. And then by hitting that eyedropper and saying this should be white, make this white, and make everything else adjust accordingly, then that's how we re-white balance the shot. I'm going to go and make sure I hit save so that it saves. And then let's pretend we're done, and I'm going to export my shot. So really simple. Up at the top, there's 3 buttons. Import was to bring our shots in. Edit is what we did. Color corrected, we trimmed, we added sound effects and music if necessary. And then export, now we are all done, and we want to send it out of the editor so that we can put it on social media, put it on YouTube, or play it on TV screens. Whatever we want to do, we want to export it as an MP4. So just like before, we got to make sure that it's named correctly. So file name, change that. Make sure your last name is in it at the beginning. Last name in, and also your period number. So period 2, last name, and then what it is. Spray paints. And I'm just going to change this to commercial. Locations where are we saving the exported video? Never assume that it's always right. Just double click on it or click on it. Make sure it's in desktop in your folder. And then down here, I always just make sure that in the range, it's entire source. And so if you do in to out, then it might not do the whole project. So entire source, and then H.264 is our format. That's usually already preset, but just double check. If it doesn't work, then that's something set wrong there. And then when you hit export, it'll take a second, and depending on how long and complicated your project is how long it'll take to do that. And then when you're all done, and if I minimize this, when you open your folder, you should see a couple of things. So one, the Premiere project always has that PR. Can't use that in anything except editing in Premiere. My final version is over here. So and I know that because I named it 2 Polini spray paint commercial. These are still my raw original shots, but because I named it, and then now it has the effects we put on, which was a transition, a super, and then also her voiceover. So that is the final project. So that is how you edit from start to finish. We made a folder on the desktop, moved our shots in there. In Premiere, we created a new project that is named last name and the project that it is, spray paint commercial in this case. We put it in my folder. I trimmed, I added shots to the sequence. I trimmed, I added music, special effects, graphics, and titles. I played with the audio. I showed you how to fade, and then also showed you how to export. So that is the basics of how to edit from start to finish.